Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Crupi. I'm a biologist with 15 years of academic research experience internationally, and I've been working on a lot of different things, and ultimately I have also had to overcome a lot of personal challenges. I'm here to guide you towards awakening and ego death. Ego death and trauma healing are the most important tasks we need to accomplish today for humanity. The second season of the New Earth podcast is going to be specifically focused on giving you stories so that you see the trails and what kind of breadcrumbs you need to follow for you to reach your own ego death, for you to reach your own trauma healing, and for you to embody your highest self finally. Let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. And we have David today. Thank you, David, for joining us. He's a Mayan Time Keeper. Actually, he's training to be a Mayan Time Keeper. And he does a lot of different things, and he has his own special product that comes from Guatemala, his own special cacao that is all fully handmade. And he has a very, very interesting story of awakening and a journey of ego death and a journey of healing, especially, that I think there's so many people that really need to hear stories like this. And I'm very, very honored that he has been willing to come and join us today and to be interviewed by myself. Hi, David.
Hello, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit. So what kind of things do you do today? What's a Mayan Time Keeper? Sounds very cool.
Yeah. So every morning, first thing I do is a 20-minute meditation. So I meditated this morning, and I use various forms of meditation, but I do that for 20 minutes. And then I go into my space where I have my altar set up, and I do a series of prayers, shamanic journey. I connect with my spirit teams. For anyone that doesn't know what that means, spirit teams are spirits that I've made contact with that I work with to bring healing to people. Well, they bring the healing, work through me. And so I do that. I cleanse myself. I have them cleanse me and do a layer of protection over me. And then I make offerings. So I'll burn Palo Santo, sage, lavender, different herbs, sweetgrass sometimes. And I light those on fire and they burn, and the smoke serves as offering to the sun, to the cosmos, to the four corners of the earth, four corners of the wind, to all the energies of our existence, and to the elements that enable our existence. So fire, wind, water, and earth. And what I like to ask for, and this has been pretty recent because of the messages that I've gotten from the fire, and we'll go into what a Mayan Time Keeper is and what I've learned. But one of the things is to read fire. And so when I have these Mayan fire ceremonies at my space, there's all sorts of elements and things that go into the fire, and then I've been trained to read and interpret messages from the fire as spirit comes through and as it communicates. And the interesting thing is that in my life, over the past 6 months specifically, there's been this deepening of an awareness of the need to deepen my connection with the elements that enable our existence, the element of fire, right? Earth, wind, water. And the interesting thing is that it's hard for me to explain what happens in a person's life that comes as a result of a deepening of a connection with the elements. It's almost like, I think the easiest way for me to explain it is it gives me a much deeper sense of gratitude for my life. And that and what's so interesting is that's what's been going on for the last 6 months in my life. And in the last 2 or 3 fire ceremonies, at a certain point during the ceremony, that same message keeps coming through. Is for the people that are at the ceremonies to deepen and strengthen their connection to the elements, because they're what gives us life.
Yeah, and also
right?
it's what connects you to the spirits whenever you talk to them. It's like, I feel like it's like a way of closing the circle, right? I like it. I love it. Like, I've always been fascinated by fire. Like, as a child, I remember I used to live in this house in the south of Italy where, I come from a low-income family, so we had this huge house, but we didn't have heaters, and so we only had a fireplace. And so I remember that I would stare at the fire all night because I was really dragged to it. And in fact, I'm very Pitta. I have a very Pitta energy,
Me
that
too.
like I'm like Pitta. I feel like my 2 main elements are fire and water. And that's why I'm near a pool, and like the colors in my place are all about like the sea, the water as well. I feel like, and it's interesting actually because I have that picture there that is very fiery. It's like all red, and then all of this is very water. Like it totally makes sense.
Yeah, we should look up your Mayan energy. We can do that.
Oh, absolutely. That would
And
be so
we can talk a
interesting.
little bit about it.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That's
But, well,
so
and,
cool.
and on that note, that's one of the other things that I did this morning, which I do every morning. After I make those offerings, then I also do an offering to, and I invoke the energy of the day. So the way that the Mayan calendar, well, one of the Mayan calendars works, is there's 20 energies in what's called the Cholkich, or most people know it as the Zolkin, which is more how it's called in like the Riviera Maya, like the Mexico area of the Mayan territory. And so the Cholkich goes in a 20-day cycle, and it rotates counterclockwise. Okay. And so there's 20 energies in the Cholkich. And simultaneously, as that 20-day cycle is going, there's a 13-day cycle. So in total, it's a 9-month calendar. It's 260 days. So it's a lunar calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not.
I was about to ask you that.
And so there's 13 manifestations of each energy, right? There's 20 energies. So 13 times 20 is 260. And so each day we're carried by a different energy. Right.
This so much makes sense. Like I organize events that I call Moon Seeds, and there's one on the 29th. If this episode is gonna air before that, and basically what I do is I show people how the moon affects our mood in a huge way, because it's not, and maybe the Mayans have just really deepened that connection with the moon and with understanding how the lunar cycle changes our mood and how the different kind of every day, and this is true, has a different energy, because I don't know if they talk about this. So what I tell people based on my immunology experience or like expertise is that basically the fact that the moon changes distance between the earth and the moon, the distance changes throughout the lunar cycle, and with the new moon and the full moon. So the 13 days calendar totally makes sense, because it takes 13 to 14 days for the moon to go from new moon to full moon, right? And then to go the full cycle again. And so it totally makes sense, that they have this 13 days calendar, and then it is a lunar cycle in the end.
Yeah, it's complicated because it's 13 and it's 20.
I don't understand the 20.
Okay, so I'll explain it like this. So, and this is one of the things that I did this morning, which is, so I always invoke the Mayan energy of the day. I ask for a deepening of a connection with it. I ask for a deepening connection with the elements. Ukushkach is heart of the sky. Ukushuleo, heart of the earth. Kushka, which is heart of the fire. Kushcha, which is heart of the water. and Ukushkek, which is heart of the wind. And so I ask for a deepening relationship with those energies. And then, so today, okay, is 13, the number 13, and the energy is called Akabal, is the name of the energy.
Okay.
So today's, if you get specific with it, right, it would be, today is 13 Akabal. Now there's meanings of the numbers, and then there's also meanings of what the energy represents. So, and to give you, just so you can kind of visualize how the calendar works, okay? So if today is 13, right, and I said there's 13 manifestations of each energy, then what that means is tomorrow, okay, so so tomorrow will be 1 kat is the name of the energy. Then the next day will be 2 kan. Next day will be 3 kame, right? And so on and so forth. And so as the energy is shifting, the number is shifting as well. So that's why. And considering that there's 13 manifestations of each energy, that means that out of all of the days in the 260-day calendar, that is when Akabal, or whatever the energy is that falls on a 13 like that, that means that the energy is even stronger. Like it's the strongest manifestation of the Akabal energy.
Okay, and so because they move, so basically it's not that every 13 is Akabal.
Correct.
Sorry?
Yes, okay. Akabal, correct. In 260 days, well, it may fall twice. It may fall, sometimes it'll fall, because it just depends. Sometimes it can fall twice in a 260-day cycle. Sometimes it will only fall once in a 260
So basically, there are these 13 energies?
20 energies and 13
manifestations
of each
now
energy.
I understood. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
So now I've understood exactly how it works. I'm not sure whether that can be related to the distance of the moon, or like it may be related to other things as well, or maybe to all the 4 elements and to all of this. Maybe it's more related to that. But the 13 days are for sure. And so what is this energy that we have today, for example?
Yeah. Well, and just to comment on what you just said, so there is a lot of study between, for the Mayans, the moon, Venus, and the sun, and like those 3 are like the trifecta. And there's even there's a calendar that's still used, which for the agricultural system, which is called the Abish calendar. But so Akabal represents the light and the dark, the sun and the moon. And so one of the interpretations of today's energy is for us to look inside and heal the relationship we have with ourselves. Because at every point in one of my teachers says this, which is at every point in a person's life, they're afraid of the dark, right? But then as we grow older, what really people are afraid of is themselves.
Yeah.
And so doing that shadow work, going inside, learning how to heal the relationship that we have with ourselves, is what, like, the overarching message of today's energy, which is don't run from your shadow, right? Don't run from your problems.
And it's interesting that we did this thing today, because we're going to be talking a lot about shadow
Yeah.
work.
Yes,
about
we
so
are.
much shadow work. So the fact that today, and this has just been random, that today we have we're specifically, dealing with this shadow work and the light that you have brought in the world, thanks to also the Mayan Calendar and the Mayan Time Keeper work that you're doing. I think it goes together so well, and I love really this, and I feel like we have the reason why we're kind of we are going back because these people, the Mayan Time Keepers, have been doing that since the time of the Mayan, right? Yeah, but like I feel like the fact that we're going back today to, as a white population, we're going back to these Native American and ancient cultures, is because we've been really like detached from the truth for a long time. Like these ancient cultures had discovered how really the world works, and through the modern history, the population has been slowly but surely and intentionally detached from all of these things, from the influence of the moon on us, from all of the different energies, because these are ways in which we are aligned. And as you're saying, once you're aligned, you deepen your connection with the elements, you deepen your connection with the spiritual world, and you're more centered, and you do your shadow work, and you're healthy, right? And modern society doesn't want us to be healthy, and so that's why we're really we're really trying to go back to cultures that they knew already. It's just that we have forgotten today, or we've been like, all these cultures have been wiped away. So I love that we are bringing to our audience the knowledge of the Maya, right? It's incredible that we're doing this today.
Well, and what's beautiful about that is that it's also said that it's the wisdom of the indigenous that is what's going to save us. And now bringing it full circle, what's interesting about that is that in all indigenous cultures, there is the belief of animism, right? Nothing is inanimate. Yeah. There is consciousness, there is spirit in everything, and so that's so beautiful, because that deepening of the connection with the elements, that is so important in that, right? In to be able to understand that it's the relationship that we have with those elements.
Yes, it is true.
Right?
It's like, and that's why I love also plant medicine, for example, because it's a way of really working together. And that's why a lot of people don't understand the meaning of crystals, the meaning of stones, the meaning of using different kinds of materials when you do things, or like really people don't understand that everything has a spirit as well, in a sense. Like everything is an antenna, you know, like we all are antennas. Like our body is an antenna, our brain is an antenna, the objects around us are antennas for frequencies. And so if we have anything can attract a certain frequency, and that frequency is what we call spirits, really. And so like everything has a potential to attract a certain spirit, a certain kind of energy, a certain frequency. And what crystals do, for example, is they hold usually very, very specific kind of frequencies, because they're very ordered, you know, they have a very ordered kind of chemical composition and structure, and so it's a more clean kind of antenna, you know, it's very, very pure. And so people don't understand that, but it's beautiful. Absolutely, we need to be healthy, we need to connect with all of that. And I feel like especially today, for what concerns alcohol consumption, for example, people don't understand that the reason why it's called spirit is because it does hold spirits. It's a carrier, it's an antenna for spirits. And when you drink something that contains spirits, you're eating a spirit, right? And so the same thing as with food and everything, right? But so that's why we also have like junk food, or like there is food that is good for you, or food that is bad for you, because everything carries energy. Or also just us, being in a bad mood while eating, we tend to carry that. So being mindful of all of these realms is so necessary for us to truly be healthy and to truly be present. Because what is being present ultimately being present is being able to connect with all there is, and to be aware of all there is, and to be here, and to truly connect with everything in a proper way, instead of being in our head and being compulsive and doing things that don't make any sense, and really detach from the truth, right? And once you detach from the truth, then you're lost. And so it's important to be present, because being focused and being centered is not about being in a certain place. It's not about your geographical or geometrical location, right? It's about where are you focusing on, like, are you really centered? Are you really focused on a certain thing or not? And if you're not aware of all of these energies around you, how can you be centered? Like, I feel like my main my main realization has been when I found my purity, and I found my pure essence, because I'm a medium too, and I hadn't realized that, and so I was absorbing all of these energies, and I had all of these energies on top of my own energy, and I had
That
no
must have
idea.
been tough.
I mean, I did not, like, I spent 35 years like that, like, so I had no idea, and so once I finally found my purity, plant medicine showed me, like, this is not you. All of these things that you have on top are not you. You're absorbing these things from the outside, and we do that all the time. We don't realize that we do that all the time. And I mentioned alcohol because, this story also has to do with that as well. But I feel like in general, we really need to become more aware. And the fact that the Maya already knew, like, they knew already that all of these things are important for us, and that we need to make. Because it's not about isolating yourself from the spiritual world. It's about connecting with it and be aware of it, instead of being just a channel that then you don't know that you're a channel, but you are. And so you keep absorbing these things and being out of focus because you don't believe even that they exist.
Yeah, well, that's one of the interesting things about certain energies. And so we all have a Mayan energy of birth because the 260-day cycle is continuously going. And so there are certain energies, certain people's energies, that they absorb a lot of people's, like who they are around is extremely important in their life because they're extremely sensitive. It'll be interesting when we look yours up. And that's one of the things of what, when we'll get into this later on in the podcast, but that's one of the reasons how I got on this path and went so far down this rabbit hole, is because I've looked up, I mean, at this point, it's got to be well over 250 people maybe looking up their Mayan energy, and it's incredibly accurate. I
want to know now.
We'll
Let's
look
do
it up.
It now. Can we do it like
so
in the episode?
Incredible. Yeah. You want to do it right now?
Guys, yes. I want to know. Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
Let's see. Oh, my phone's off. I gotta turn it back.
Oh, it's completely off.
Well,
okay. You can use mine if you like. But like, I love this. And so tell me a little bit, I'm trying to understand. So we have 260 days, you said, right? So is the calendar the same in terms of how these energy? I don't think so, but just asking to make sure. But is the cycle of these energies the same every year, or like is it kind of like rolls over every year? Because it's different. I imagine it's like the 13 doesn't divide perfectly to 260, or does it?
Right.
No, because it is. The 20th. I'm talking about the energies. Like the energies don't fit. Like the 20 and 13 are not multiple of each other. So I'm imagining that during the 260 days, like this year, for example, today we have this energy, right? But next year, the same day is not going to be the same energy.
Correct.
Okay,
so
it's different.
Correct.
So
that's why I said that in a 260-day cycle, sometimes an energy will fall once, and sometimes it'll fall twice.
So, and what is the total...
Okay, so wait. Hey, let's look it up.
What is the total cycle that the calendar makes in order for this cycle to get back to the same cycle again? If you know that. So, like, for example, today is this energy, this specific energy, right? So, in how many years are we going to have the same day, the same energy falls?
Well, it could be next year. I mean, it just depends on the count. So, and one thing I didn't talk about is that whenever, like, so tomorrow, I said is going to be cut, right? Yeah. So, so tomorrow is one cut. For the next 13 days starting tomorrow, it gets really complex. Each energy that falls over the next 13 days is going to be affected
by the
cut energy.
Oh wait, what?
So, yeah, it gets pretty complex. I mean, I mean, I'm going to be studying it for the rest of my life, and I'm going to still be learning. Yeah, it's like,
so what is
so it's complex. I don't know how to make it simpler.
Easy. Absolutely, yeah.
But like, all I'm saying is within a 260-day cycle, 13 akabal could fall once, it could fall twice. It just depends on how the count goes. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, understand. And so are we supposed to kind of organize our life and like
it's an excellent
based
question.
on the energies, like
So
what is the usefulness?
Yes,
Yes, the practicality.
Excellent question. So I'm in a relationship right now, and you better believe when we have children, I'm going to be raising my child according to what their weaknesses and their strengths are, according to the information contained within their Mayan energy of birth, because it's said that everything you are, everything you have been, and everything you will be is all contained within your Mayan energy of birth.
Okay.
And so if you understand what the lessons are and what it represents, it shows you that actually the Mayans say what seems to be our biggest weakness is our biggest strength. And so once you understand that what you perceive as a weakness is actually a strength, it changes your whole life. And that's what happened to me. And when I understood and learned about my own Mayan energy, because I'm represented by the eagle and the condor, and you can't and the quetzal, which is the national bird of Guatemala, you can't put an eagle, well, you can try to put an eagle in a cage, but it's going to go nuts. But a quetzal, they will die. If you put them in a cage, they die. That's how much they need to be out of free, right? And when I learned that, I had already been a recovering people pleaser and approval seeker for years. But when I learned that little piece of information, that the most important thing in my life is to be myself, no matter what, in front of everyone, all the time. I just totally letting my freak flag fly, right? Just really being authentically true to who I am and showing up in the world that way. And when I learned that, it unlocked something for me. It literally was like I became a free bird. I was able to give myself a greater sense of permission to just be myself. And you could say, you could say that's a lesson for anyone, right? That's a good message for anyone.
I mean, every message is good for everybody.
However, people that are born with my energy, it's particularly important, because if people with Tzikeen energy do not do that, then they become closed off, they isolate, I could push people away, right? And so there's so much. We could go on, and I could go on and on for hours, but let's look up your energy. So you're gonna have to give me your birth date, though.
Let me write it down, because I want to give my...
Okay, so you gotta go here.
Okay,
you gotta scroll to the year here.
Okay, I can tell you my age, I don't care, it's just for the... Do not give my birthday on
yeah, I totally.
Okay.
So wait, that's the year?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah. Okay.
And then guys, I'm excited.
So make sure
I don't know about you, but I'm really excited.
So make sure that's right?
Yes.
Okay.
Accept.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Show them how.
So this is an app called Zolkin.
Zolkin?
Yeah, like I said, that's how this calendar is more commonly referred to.
Okay,
Tzolkin.
Okay.
But what I can tell you, so you have extreme potential to be a healer. Your energy is 7 Tihash. So it's the number 7. And the number, the information contained within the number system is very varied from tribe to tribe. It's almost like it's been interpreted, and it was one thing that the messages of what Tihash is about is very concrete, which, by the way, 13, which is today, is about ascension. And so it's important for us to do things or not do things that will assist in that ascension of consciousness. But The number 7 is about awakening. And so what that means is that it's super important for you to be on a healing path, which you are. And so it's very beautiful to see that this is your energy, because a lot of times what happens, depending on the person and where they are at in their journey, is, people will often be very aligned. And so you are so each energy, right? Each of the 20 energies has either an animal, an element, or a thing that represents that energy. Like I said, I'm represented by the eagle, the condor, and the quetzal. Your main one is the double-bladed obsidian knife. And the people that are born with Tihash are known, you were talking about stones earlier, and so the people that are born on Tihash are often called like the Mayan doctors. Like people that are born with the energy of Tihash can go into the field of medicine and being doctors. They can be very skilled at it. And so the message for you is, so a knife, a double-bladed obsidian knife.
Which is funny because Lumina was selling those a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was so attracted to them. Because I consider myself a sort of like warrior too, like at these warrior sides. Yeah. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so what, a knife can be used as a tool, right? Or can be used to stab.
Oh, to stab, yeah.
Can be used as a weapon, right? And that's why it's so incredibly important for people that are Tihash to do their healing work, right? For you to really dig in and continue to do the shadow work and to not stray from that path. And I'll say it with a caveat, which is we don't ever want to get into a pattern where it's like, what's the next thing to heal? Okay, I've healed this. What's the next thing, right? We want to also be able to do our shadow work and to do our light work, and then also be able to just enjoy and live our lives. So, sometimes in the healing circles and communities, it can almost be like an obsession. Like healing can almost become almost another obsession, right? And so what it means is that powerful blade that you possess, it's important for you to cut away your own negativity, to do your healing work, to do your shadow work, and also because if you don't, then you could take that blade and stab yourself with it, or stab someone else, or stab someone else with it. And so you can have a tendency maybe to push people away a little bit. Like that could be something that, maybe something that you deal with. Also, what you said earlier, which is that it's very important who you choose to be around.
Yeah.
Right? Tihash has the ability to cut that negative energy. Yet it's so important that you surround yourself with good, high vibe people.
Oh my gosh, this is so
because you will be so affected, and you're similar to another energy, which is Kat, which is tomorrow's energy. Which Kat is it's represented by the spider and the net, and so what's important is if a fisherman casts its net to fish, to catch the fish, if they're not catching fish, they won't keep trying to catch fish in the same spot, right?
Yeah.
They're going to go to a different spot. And so that's also a message for you because it's intertwined with that energy. And so whatever you're trying to build in your life, if it's not working, it's important for you to become conscious of that and switch spots.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's a little bit about your energy. And it gets, like I said, it's so incredibly complex. That's just your main energy. There's 9 energies in a full Mayan chart.
I love it. I would like to
So
read it.
I can send
We should
you.
organize an event together.
I'm
like
sure.
People read the,
For sure.
And
I can send you information on this energy, but like an actual chart reading is really supposed to only be done by a true Mayan timekeeper, by an Akhikab. It's the easiest translation for what an Akhikab is, or the Akhikab are. An Akhikh is the singular, are really the ones that, should be doing a full chart reading. But there's also a website called Maya Tikum, Tecum, Maya, M-A-Y-A.
We're going to give all these websites in the description.
Sure.
They're so
Maya
interesting.
Tikum, and it's different than the app because that's really like the best source, and you can use Google Translate to translate it. So look it up on like a Google browser and then click that button that says translate to English. And there you can actually see 5 of your energies because it shows you your Mayan cross basically, which is your main energy, which is the energy you're born on, right? So yours is 7 Tihash. Then it shows you your upper energy, your bottom, and your left and your right. So that's why they call it a Mayan cross. But really, there's 3 on top, 3 in the middle, and then 3 below. So in the full chart to understand actually the full picture of.
Okay. So how long is it gonna take for you to become Mayan Time Keeper? Because you're training for that.
Yeah. That's a very good question. I don't know.
Okay.
By the way, I've had people ask me if this is vodka in this blue water bottle. It's not. I assure you, this is just water.
This is beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. And so, I don't know. I have a trip that right now that's the dates are being organized and worked out for when I was just there about a month and a half ago meeting a new teacher.
There where?
In Guatemala. Yeah, excuse me. In Guatemala, yes. That's where my first teachers were, and this is a new teacher. And he's 88 years old.
Wow.
We didn't even realize that, and I got connected to him through a connection of my father, who's from Guatemala. It's like all these incredible, cosmic pieces just came together. I mean, the chances of me finding a major elder like this to go and complete the rest of my training is really it's a blessing and an honor, and I'm quite thrilled and humbled by it. But he's 88 years old, and when I go back, him and his teacher, who's a little younger, 76 still, they're working out the dates right now to complete the rest of my training to walk. They call it walking altars, to walk the rest of the altars, and to then be given what they call your sacred staff, which is when you're given the authority as an Akhikh. So I don't know. Long answer to an I don't know question is really.
But it's soon.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Honestly, it could be, it might not be. I don't know.
Because of course these are also all intuitive paths. These are not paths. There's you get a certificate, you become a doctor, right? You graduate.
Yeah.
It's not how it works because this is real growth. Real growth into your full self, into who you're supposed to be, and it's beautiful that you're doing that. So I feel like it's a very unique kind of path, and as you're saying, all these cosmic things that brought you into becoming a trainee in the Mayan Time Keeper journey. So how did you get here? Like, so where did you start? You said
Yeah.
your dad is from Guatemala. Were you
No,
born in
no, no, no.
Guatemala?
My dad's from Florida.
I'm from Florida.
I was a contact of his.
Who was from Guatemala?
It was a contact of his business partner, who is from Guatemala, and so that's how I got connected to my new teacher. And so yeah. So, long story, right? We'll see how I can make
We
it.
have a couple hours.
Yeah, see how
We
I
have
can
an hour
make
more.
it somewhat succinct. So, I didn't know, but I had a lot of trauma when I was a childhood, which was not as traumatic as what maybe other people's trauma would be. And I will say, for anyone out there that minimizes your own trauma because it's not as bad as, somebody who was like beaten as a child profusely, or, like that really crazy kind of abuse. That was the view that I had. I would always compare my trauma to other people's trauma, and what that actually ended up doing was it was invalidating my own trauma, and as a result, it was like creating a block for me ever being able to heal it.
Absolutely.
And,
This is so important what you just said. This is so important, and
Yeah.
I feel like I said it multiple times already. It's so important that we understand that there is no such a thing as degrees in trauma, in the sense that obviously you want to, respect people who have very deep, trauma, like having physical violence or things like that. But reality is that we don't, as kids, there is really not much of a difference between what we will consider a minimal trauma and what we consider a big trauma as adults, because a kid doesn't even know what the world is supposed to be like, and so we oftentimes tend to make comparisons, and instead for a kid there's no such thing as comparisons. We as kids, we don't know. If you're born in an environment where people beat each other all the time, for you that's the norm.
Right.
If you're born in an environment where people just lie to each other all the time, for you that's the norm. And so everybody has a different threshold of what they consider the norm. And so ultimately trauma, I feel like the trauma is the same kind of effect on kids, regardless of the trauma. In a sense, it's still a trauma. Like I feel like trauma should be like a word. It is like discretized. There are no degrees, because once you have, it's like a binary thing. You have trauma, you don't have trauma. Like, and all of us have trauma.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's really no degrees, and it's so important to, like, when I talked about deep unresolved trauma in my past episode, I talked about me being told that my dog died. And that for me I realized as an adult that had been a profound trauma for me that I hadn't realized. And so I feel like there's so many things we don't realize are trauma. So this is just, every trauma is a trauma. There is no such thing. It's just 1-0. There's no such thing as degrees.
Right. And it was being teased on the school bus and not having a lot of friends when I was a kid, that was the motivation to become a people pleaser and a approval seeker, was because I didn't have a lot of friends. I was teased a lot, and when scholastics started becoming a part of the picture, I was teased a lot for my grades because I have ADHD and mild dyslexia, and so it was harder for me. And that was my God, like the levels of self-abuse and self-hatred that came in the later years as the result of feeling stupid, of feeling like I was stupid because I just learn a different way, right? Like math, even still today, is not, I would say, one of my like major strong suits. However, in this journey, I've learned how to cultivate a lot of self-love and self-forgiveness, and I find myself surprising myself all the time on actually how smart I actually am.
That's amazing, man.
And
I love
thank you. And so all of that trauma, right? Couple that with my parents, they did the best that they possibly could, and dare I say, they did a pretty darn good job when it comes to ethics and morality and a lot of the ways in which I show up in the world. I thank my parents, and I want to just preface what I'm about to say next with that, because I'm getting emotional. It's going to make me start crying, because they've done so much for me, and they love me so much, and in all of the difficulties that you'll hear about in a moment, they never, they never gave up on me. And so yeah, but they had to work. We all need to work to make money, and they were busy, and they were gone a lot. And that created this real, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of it, separation anxiety, right? It created this, like, seemingly desperate need to get you to like me, to get you to love me, because fear of abandonment.
Yeah, I was about to say.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's abandonment trauma. Basically.
And so as the years went on, and there was,
which is what triggered the people pleasing, because then you, in fear of being abandoned,
right,
people.
It's all of it. All of it
like
triggers.
I always describe trauma, like, I feel like the phrase that we use in a lot of different ways, that is as above, so below.
Yeah.
It's really true in a lot of different ways. Like, as much as, a tree has roots, and based on how long the roots are, then you have a palm tree that is as tall as its roots, for example, or like, it's not one-to-one. But like, this is the same thing with trauma. Whenever we have a trauma that is deep, then on the other side we have to have something that, spikes out as a result of that reaction. It's the cause and effect reaction in our universe. And so people who tend to have abandonment trauma, there are different kinds of ways in which people compensate, but one of these ways is to become a people pleaser, to prevent the abandonment that you fear. You're basically escaping your whole life from being abandoned, from the fear of being abandoned. For you to not be abandoned, you will do anything. And if that anything is doing whatever people want for you to do and becoming a people pleaser, then that's
saying
what
yes when you mean no, or saying yes when you want to say no.
But the thing is that most people don't understand that it's not that your body is telling you, your mind is telling you, hey, you're doing this because you have abandonment trauma. It's like you simply fall into this spiral of having to seek validation and having to need validation, and being unhappy and sad and depressed when people don't give you validation, and feeling stupid when people don't give you approval. And then when you're 30, you're like, oh, I had abandonment trauma, that's why I was doing this, but we don't know. We just keep repeating the same toxic patterns, toxic for ourselves and sometimes for others too. And so like, I love it. I understand. I feel like your story is very common to a lot of Americans, especially, but to a lot of kids born in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s, because that's when industrialization and our moms started working. Like, that's when moms started working too, and that's when a lot of kids have developed a lot of issues because of that, because obviously it wasn't a new thing, like women finally being able to also have a place in society and to not being forced to be housewives had a huge, it's been a huge cutoff for a lot of things.
Yeah, my mom was one of 3 women in her law school.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
So you're absolutely right. And so as I grew older, I was looking for something to cope, and I found THC. I found marijuana when I was 14, and it's funny, when this other kid in my class asked me if I wanted to hang out after school. I'll never forget it. Like, I didn't understand what he meant when he asked me that, because because
You didn't have
people
friends.
weren't. I had I had some, but not like I had one very close friend named John, who's no longer with us, but that just wasn't a regular thing for me, right? And so I remember looking at him and I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, dude, like, come over and hang out. I was like, okay. And so
were how old?
they're 14. And I got introduced to marijuana, and I'll never forget it, because all of that fear, all that anxiety, everything that I had felt up to that point, when I got stoned, it was like the mind went quiet. It was like a presence was developed, and I chased that to the ends of the earth. Fast forward to 15 years old, to my mom catching me smoking weed in my bathroom on Mother's Day. I mean, talk about like some kind of weird timing for that to happen, like on Mother's Day.
But
right?
also kind of, I feel like it's kind of like always these cosmic kind of, synchronicities, because as I just said, it's because your mother was working that you had anxiety, and on Mother's Day you were doing the thing that was alleviating your pain. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And I became a daily pot smoker, and
That's the next step.
Yeah, and so and then fast forward to 16 and 17, as well as 16, I started using harder drugs, like cocaine, and of course alcohol was always in the mix. And at 16, I fell asleep at the wheel and went to the wrong side of Sepulveda and got in a head-on collision with another car. Thank God everyone was okay. And then that started my first entry into 12-step recovery programs. And the interesting thing is that it pretty much feels like if there's something that you can get addicted to it, I have it. There's all these different types of 12-step programs for all these different kinds of addiction. And it seems like I have had them all. And words are important, right? Yeah. Not have, had. And so then fast forward to at 16, I mean, I had no interest in getting sober, right? It was just...
So why did you do that?
I didn't really. I had to because of the court, because I got a DUI.
You got a DUI.
So I had to go to meetings, and I started meeting people, but I was not serious, never took it seriously. 19, fast forward, fell asleep at the wheel again.
Wow.
Got in another... I hit a light, like one of those thick light posts. I fell asleep at the wheel, went to the wrong side of the road, luckily no other cars this time, and knocked one of those concrete light posts out of its socket.
Wow.
So it was crazy. And
that's
again,
also trauma. That's all of these things are huge trauma.
Yeah, for sure. And so again, went to meetings, never took it seriously, never got a sponsor, never tried working the steps.
What's a sponsor?
Sponsor is someone in 12-step recovery program that is like a guide.
Okay.
Is like a guide for you.
Is it someone
to guide
like
to work what's called working the steps.
Is this someone who has already gone through the 12
Correct.
steps and has recovered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, yes. That's and so then fast forward to 21. Fell asleep at the wheel again.
Wow.
Got in a third car accident.
Serial.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm lucky to be alive. Clearly, those were not my times to go. And I rear-ended a car on the same side of the street this time because so. Yeah,
you were getting better.
Because I didn't go to the other side. What?
You were getting better.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so that happened, and then still just didn't take it seriously. And then fast forward to around...
I have a question
Yeah.
for you now. Like, why do you think beyond, like after all of these car accidents, right? Why do you think you were not taking it seriously? What do you like? Do you feel
I was running. I wasn't ready. I hadn't... You'd think that those would be rock bottom, right?
They were not.
It was not. Like,
So what
I
was
had
your-
so much pain, so much trauma, like, and I didn't know it.
How were you? If you had to describe yourself, how were you carrying yourself around, like, every day? Like, what were you doing at that time?
Yeah, I was going to school. I was going to college. I did go to college, and I've always had a good heart. Like, ever since I was a little kid, I would go up and make friends with strangers. Like, that was me. I just go and talk to anyone and make friends, and in that way, but yeah, so
Do you
I
feel
just...
like you were getting desensitized in a sense to all of these things, to, like, because you were, like, we're going from a kid who had been a people pleaser for a long time, who had anxiety for a long time. You finally found something that made you feel good. Do you feel like you kind of, they almost made you completely detached from reality and be like, I'm having an accident, it's just another thing, like, or your threshold for what you would consider an event in your life kind of changed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like the only explanation for it is I wasn't, they say in 12-step recovery, your bottom is when you decide to stop digging. And I wasn't ready to stop digging. I wasn't ready. I was in too much emotional pain from all the trauma, which, I also uncovered now, years later, through psychedelic work, which we'll talk about that in a bit. But I uncovered that I was actually molested on the school bus when I was like 7 years old, which I had completely blocked out for 35 years. So thank you, mushrooms, for that. And so it was a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, and I wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready. And then, but what happened was, a couple, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think it's because of that? Like, because maybe you were finally forgetting about that trauma that you did not remember about, and you were like, I don't want to get out of this train right now, and finally remember.
Maybe subconsciously.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, that could be a reason. I mean, yeah, I don't know exactly. I just know that I was running. I know that I was not willing, and I did not have the strength or the courage to face my shadow, to look at the darkness, to really take an in-depth look at myself. Instead, my priorities, which is what my priorities are now in my life, except what my priorities were, just drugs and alcohol. I mean, yeah, it was just having fun, partying under the guise of fun, and even, fun with consequences. Like, they say in 12-step, it goes from being fun with problems, and then just problems in the cycle of addiction.
Wow.
And I got maybe a year of fun without any problems. I mean, fun with problems was like almost my entire, history of that. And so it was just, just not wanting to stop. Just, also being extreme. I mean, I was young, I mean, some people get sober really young, but yeah, I was just very defiant, right? Like, don't tell me what to do, kind of an attitude, and just no humility, and I just wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't ready. But so I mean, that's the best way I think I can answer your question.
Okay, yeah.
It's a tough question to answer, but I feel like that's the best possible answer for it. Is I just wanted to keep the party going. I just wanted to not stop. I wanted to control it. I wanted to not have consequences, and to be able to continue to have that feeling. But that's the thing, is I never really even fully got to the feeling that I had that first time when I was 14, to that silent mind. but it was always chasing that. It was the experience of that, and then it was the chasing of that to the ends of the earth, regardless of what the consequences were.
Wow, that's such an interesting way of describing it. I love it. I think
So,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, and so I think I was about 23. It was a couple of years after that last accident. I started dating a girl, and she was going to meetings, and I was like, oh, I used to go to meetings, and I was at a point in my life where I was like ready to maybe give this sobriety thing a shot. So I started.
The sobriety thing.
Yeah, I started going to meetings regularly. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps, and they call it. What happens in 12-step recovery is switching seats on the Titanic, which is you stop drinking, and even if you're doing the work, and I was working the steps, I was going to meetings, I was making phone calls, I was doing all this, I had commitments at meetings, which is when you show up and do one of the service positions, had all of that. And even with that, the drugs and the alcohol stopped, but I still I did a 4th-step inventory. I looked at, my fears, my resentments. That's what a 4th step is. Fear, resentments, previous partners, a sex inventory. I did all that, but still, there was molestation that I had, 20 years earlier or whatever that I had completely blocked out. And so even with all that, I found other things to get addicted to that weren't drugs and alcohol.
Such as?
Gambling, sex, right? The other ways that you can get dopamine rushes in your brain, because really addiction is a dopamine. Religion is a religion. That's a whole nother conversation. Addiction is a dopamine issue, right? And so then I ran up all of this credit card debt and gambling, and then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I might as well just try smoking weed. At least I wasn't losing all of my money. And I relapsed. And then, fast forward to 2008. I don't know how old I was at that time. Can't do the math right now. But 2008, I went off the freaking deep end. I broke up with the girl that I was dating for 2 years at that point, and then went hardcore into drugs. I started getting tons of drugs, ecstasy, and all these different things, and went down, lower than I had ever been. Got more addicted to cocaine than I had ever been. I had never really experienced the depths of a cocaine addiction, even when all the times it was addictive, but then when I was done with whatever I had, I wasn't crazy. Well, this time, I put myself in all this gambling debt, and then I was partying at this point. And then it was double. Then I was still partying and gambling. I couldn't give up the gambling. So it was just worse on worse. And then I was having all these people asking me for drugs, and I was in all this, this debt from gambling. And I was distraught, and I was I'm never going to be able to pay this off. What am I going to do? And I got the brilliant idea to start dealing drugs.
Wow.
And so then that happened. That went on, and it was funny. When I started that, I was $15,000 in debt. By 4 months later, around July of 2008, I was over $30,000.
How is it possible?
Because I was not a good drug dealer. If you were partying, I was the drug dealer that you wanted around, because I would just put everything out and just let people. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I want people to like
That's
me,
the worst
right? So it was just I would go to a table and just have a bag of Coke and just put it on the table. And I mean, and then the cash that I would get, I wouldn't use to pay off the credit cards, and then I just kept charging on the credit. I mean, like I said, this was the lowest, the lowest, like, physical, externally bottom that I had. And so
what have you done? Like, you interrupted the 12 steps, basically.
What?
So you interrupted the 12 steps.
Well, I relapsed. I wasn't doing them anymore. I left the program.
The fourth step.
Yeah. I don't remember. I was after a fourth step. Yeah, okay. That sounds about right, because a lot of people typically relapse after fourth step.
I feel like people should mix together like nutritional interventions and other kind of interventions, because what you're talking about is really neurobiological. Like, people don't understand that if you have a certain addiction, it's because neurobiologically speaking, you have areas of your brain that are active, and if you don't turn them off, if you don't feed other areas of your brain, of course you're going to have a relapse, because you're trying to rationally force yourself into not doing things that you have a compulsion for, that you have a compulsion to do. And if you don't instead really change your brain, nothing is going to happen. And so I think they should really start thinking of changing, adding some cushion to that, something in addition, like an adjuvant, Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it would be absolutely helpful. Yeah.
And so going back to your story,
so then, like, 4 months later, after that bender, I was irresponsible again, driving, and it was a whole thing where, I had went into rehab, but then I left the rehab a few days later, and it's just really crazy. And so I went on a bender. I hadn't slept for about 3 days, and all I remember is getting to my car, and the next thing I know, I wake up, I come to, and there's 3 cop cars around my car and an ambulance.
What have you done?
And exactly, what have I done? And so what's crazy, I was blacked out, and in my blackout, because, just to backtrack for a second, all of the gambling that I did was to Casino Morongo in the desert, and I'm in LA, and so I was driving back and forth all the time. Even sober, I've probably fallen asleep at the wheel hundreds of times.
Wow.
And what had happened, and that's sober, and I'm not saying even under the influence. It was just, So, and I don't have narcolepsy. I've been tested for it. But in my blackout, I must have realized that I was tired, thank God, and I pulled over and then had my foot on the brake and passed out with the car in drive, with my foot on the brake, blocking someone's driveway. And so she called, and she tried to wake me up. I was out. Cops came. Found out later, the cops had been outside my window for a half an hour, banging on the window, trying to wake. No, though, this is when I was on the whole bender.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, timeline shift. No, I'm saying this is when I was doing all the drugs, and I was on the big bender, and this was the last of it, and so they broke my back window to wake me up, and so that's what woke me up. And then I rolled down my window. I didn't know what was going on. I look at the cop and I said, "Is there a problem, officer?" Like, I didn't know what was going on. Yeah, and he was like, "Are you okay?" Like, at first it was concern. He's like, "Are you okay?"
And I was like, and someone's driving,
and you're outside the car trying to wake him up, and I was like, I was high. I was like, I looked at him. I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." I was like, "I'm okay," and he was like, "Step out of the car, please." And so I go to get out of the car. I didn't realize the car was in drive, and the car starts to roll forward, and I hit the car in front of me, and then he's yelling at me, "Put the car in park," right? And at this point, I was so done. It was really the end. And I went into the ambulance. They put me in the ambulance. They were searching my car. I knew what was coming, but I had the cocaine, like the big portion of it, in my pocket. And the cop, came, and he came up to the ambulance, and he said, "David, we found a small bag of narcotics in your car." And I just looked at him. And I was so tired. and I was so done. I just looked at him and I said, "Officer, I need to change my life." And I took the half ounce of blow out of my pocket and I just gave it to him.
Oh my gosh.
And it was amazing is the look of shock on his face. Is he like looked at me and he kind of was like that. And then he looked at the bag and then he looked at me and he like very earnestly, he was like, "Okay." And he took it, right? They impound the car. They're, and it was so funny. I was like talking to these cops like they were my therapist. Like when I was in the back, I was like, "Officer," "I don't know how I let my life get to this point. I feel so lost." And as we were going from like the patrol car into the station, like from the parking lot, I'll never forget it. We're in the parking lot, and he looks at me, he had these like aviator silver sunglasses on. He takes his sunglasses off. He looks at me, puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, "David, you just keep being honest and everything's going to be okay." Who knew that was going to be like and who knew that like it was actually honesty is like the core essential for everything in my life, to be honest with myself, right?
That was such a beautiful thing.
It was
it was a karmic thing, it was because a cop that touches something like that, like
it was like
it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and so then they booked me, and I called a friend to bail me out. But when I was in jail, I called my mom and I said, she was like, "Okay, but you're staying in jail." And they were done. They were pissed, obviously. And so I called a friend and he bailed me out. They give you 18 months, and if you don't get arrested, the felony gets knocked down to like a misdemeanor. So I don't have a felony on my record.
Okay.
But that, and that was the bottom, and I got sober, and I really started working the steps, but then again, and so I'm trying to fast forward. I know it's a long story, but then again in 2013, I still hadn't healed all of that underlying trauma. It's still, even after working the steps and doing all that and being earnest, and so in 2013, I relapsed again. Now that was the longest time I had ever been sober. I had 4.5 years sober from 2008 to 2013. I relapsed, and I went on a short bender, and then that time I developed a super crazy strong addiction to Molly, to MDMA. Right. Well, Molly, a lot of times they call it Molly. You don't really know if it's just pure MDMA in it, really, unless you test it. But that's what it's supposed to be. And so I got a crazy addiction. I had a crazy addiction for that. Paid off all the debt. Was in a good place in my life, and then relapsed again. But this time, after the relapse, I was like, I was lost, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I called my buddy Elliot, who I had known from high school, and I was like, because I had seen him at meetings, in the years past, those 4.5 years I was sober, and I was like, dude, I relapsed, I don't know what to do, and it was a very short relapse. It was only for a couple months, and he was like, "Yeah, man, my sponsor, we have these meetings at his house," and that fateful day, I made the decision to go and meet a man named Luke. Who is the man that really changed everything for me. Well, he always says, "I didn't really do anything for you. You did it yourself." But I feel like he just says that to be humble. I don't know, because he really did change my life and changed a lot of other people's lives. And so he took me through the 12 steps in a different way. And what he helped me build was this awareness of my mind. And there's these meetings, they were called prime time. And this guy who was like my great grand sponsor, like my sponsor's sponsor, right? It was like a lineage of sponsors, and it was all in developing an awareness of alcoholism, ego, and self, and even though alcohol was never like my main problem, it was really more drugs. If I ever drank, I knew that if I ever touched alcohol, the second I touched it, I started smoking weed again. Then when I started smoking weed again, I had to have it every day. And I tried to control it. I tried for
Yeah,
years.
that's what their addictions are. Addictions
right?
are something you cannot control because they're neurobiological,
yeah,
biochemical,
And so it was, but the interesting thing is that the idea of that is that it's a disease of the mind, right? And so if it's a disease of the mind, then you need to watch your mind. You need to see the types of thoughts that you're having. And no one had ever told me that. And so then, and he was like, I started hanging out with him and his brother, and we had this like little crew of guys that were like real serious about the program and working the steps and going to meetings and really, but a new way of understanding it. And he was like, yeah, this is what we do every morning. We wake up, just like I told you this morning. I meditated for 20 minutes. I've been doing that since 2013 daily. And so he was like, we wake up, first thing we meditate and read some literature, get centered for the day, do some prayers, and right. And so literally, I've been living my life that way. Although now, obviously, there's a lot more to it.
More
but
Mayan related things.
Yeah, and spirit, other kinds of spirituality. And so he was like, we watch our mind. He's like, when you're meditating, start to watch your mind. Start to try to see the types of thoughts that you're having. And when he said that, and then I did that, then I knew how much trouble I was really in, because then I really started to see my mind. But
what kind of thoughts?
All of the self-hatred, the self-loathing, like just obsessive thinking, is just negative thinking, just so incredibly negative.
Of course you wanted to numb it down with like drugs, right?
Yeah.
Like it was unbearable for you. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And we did it all the time, like a lot of people don't watch their mind, and we should all do that. And in the previous series especially, we talked about the witness modality a lot.
Yes.
Which is something very powerful. And we can repeat a little bit what that is. It's really about you creating this, and it's a neurobiological thing. That's why I'm saying that basically before you told me about Luke, basically I told you that they should put together these two things, because you can't only go with the giving people instruction to stop using a drug, because that's a neurobiological thing. And obviously if you go in a rehab and you're really prevented from using drugs, that's a different thing, because you go through the withdrawal symptoms and you don't have the substance near you, so you can't possibly use it. So ultimately the cells in your brain that really give you addiction just die out of starvation, because you're not giving them any food, right? Any of the drug that keeps them alive.
Yeah.
But if you're not in a rehab, and if you're just going through the 12 steps, you really need to go deeper into the neurobiology of your compulsion, and so watching your mind, it's important, because as we said at the beginning, and this all goes in full circle, is that when we have a trauma, then we overcompensate, and that overcompensation is literally a cell that pops out in your brain, in a sense that like we really start making all of these neurobiological circuits that ultimately are literally physical, and so you need to start watching what those things are doing, because those are things it's like our brain is like a garden, it's like a garden. And so if you don't watch your garden, sometimes you may realize that some plants are growing that you're not becoming aware of, and the first day that you see those plants growing, you don't even see them. They're there, they're sprouting, something new is sprouting, you're like, oh, okay, interesting, right? And if you keep now watching, and maybe they spread more than the others, or maybe the kind of water, the kind of like things you're giving to your garden feed those better than the ones you want to grow, then that becomes a problem.
Yeah, beware of the seeds that you plant in the garden of your mind.
Exactly. And if you don't do that, you don't really realize what is growing, what is not, and what is... And one day you just wake up and your whole garden has completely changed shape. And initially you had certain flowers and certain plants and certain fruit, and thanks to that you were able to have certain functions that were useful for you, because you had the lemon tree and the apple tree, and you had the flowers, and all of those had a function. And then one day you wake up and the lemon tree is dying and the apple tree is dying because there is bad weeds that are everywhere, but you have gotten so used to the bad weeds going everywhere, you are confused, because now you're not eating the lemons, which helped you be focused, you're not eating the apples, which helped you be... And so by not being, by allowing your garden to not have the functions that you need to pay attention to your garden, then you don't pay attention to your garden starts changing shape in a way that makes you having lesser capability of paying attention to your garden. And I think this is a beautiful analogy that I just like for the first time.
Yeah, I love that. It's absolutely true. Well, and on that, on the witness, so one of the things that our grand sponsor used to say was, he would say, so you know how when you're meditating and you can see your thoughts, right? So I started learning that, and then, working on it and growing, and he said, who's that watching? Who's the one watching? That's who you really are.
Yeah.
That's the real you. That's your soul. That's your spirit, right? These were all things that were all very new to me at that time. And so I was like, and I knew from that first meeting, I was sitting across from Luke, and he was sitting in this black chair. And we weren't even talking about the program. He was talking about reincarnation. He was talking about Dr. David R. Hawkins, who I've listened to now countless hours of his work. And he is just, I feel like, just such an incredible ultimate teacher for me. So he said, actually, I can't even remember what he said. I just remember looking at him, and I knew what he was saying was the truth. I knew it, and I was like, I need this guy in my life. I need to stay as close to this guy as I possibly can. This guy is gonna freaking help me. And he did, man. He changed my life. And over the course of those next 7 years, I mean, my life improved. I wasn't in debt anymore. I wasn't gambling anymore. I still had some of the sex stuff, but that started to level out too. And my life got a lot better, and for the first time in my life, I was like sponsoring other people in the program, right? I took the program more seriously than I ever had in my life, and it was just a whole new awakening for me and level of being, and even still, after all that time, there was still unresolved trauma, and in 2018, Luke, after being sober for 20 plus years, decided he has a podcast, and he was interviewing people, and he started learning more about people's experiences with ayahuasca and plant medicine, and Luke too, he says this all the time, is that there was unresolved trauma, and so he went down the plant medicine path at 20 years sober. And over the course from 2018 to 2020, I watched his life just explode in all the most beautiful, positive ways possible. I mean, he became debt-free. He started building this podcast, which now has become very successful. He met his, soon-to-be wife. Like, just all of these things. It was just undeniable. It's like, whoa. And then there I was, again, at another bottom, but this time sober again. With 7 years of sobriety.
That's a lot. Good job, man.
Yeah, thank you. I broke up with a girl that I was dating at that time, and I hit a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bottom. It was July of 2020. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Luke was not, I didn't talk to him as much anymore. He was sort of out of the recovery, circles in that respect. And so he wasn't my sponsor really anymore, although I still call him my sponsor, even though he's, technically not. But I was like, shoot, man, maybe it, he gave me hope a second time, right? Because he gave me hope that first time in 2013, and then a second time because I was like, shoot, it worked for Luke, maybe it'll work for me. But I was because I had built now this great life, no more debt, and I was doing really well, and I was like, I didn't know if I go and I do this, if what they call the phenomenon of craving, which I talked a little bit about that, right? I didn't know if I go and I do this, whatever plant medicine I ended up doing, if it was going to, ignite that phenomenon of craving, and then I was going to destroy my life once again. And right, so it was I was very trepidatious about it. And then what happened actually was I was considering doing ayahuasca, but then I didn't do it, and I was in so much pain. It was almost like I needed to relapse. Like I went and I got some weed and smoked it. Or actually no. I had pain medication left over from a surgery. And
and that's another form of addiction. A lot of people are addicted to how's it called?
Opioids.
Yeah, opioids, but like there's a specific name, like a specific one.
Well, morphine or Vicodin.
Vicodin,
but
that's
yeah.
a lot.
And I crushed it and I snorted it, and then I smoked some weed, and then the next day I started going to meetings again. Like it was literally a 1-day relapse. Although psychologically I was so indoctrinated into the belief of the phenomenon of craving that I needed to and so identified with the amount of time that I had sober that I was going to lose. So it was like I had to throw that away psychologically to then give myself permission, because I was like, well, now I have 1 day sober. It's not like I'm going to be losing 7 years of sobriety. I might as well go try this plant medicine thing because, it worked for Luke. Maybe it'll work for me.
I understand your point.
And
that you were like, I don't want to go to do plant medicine after sobriety. I want to do it after having a relapse.
I mean, that was my story, and I want to just say full disclosure and a caveat, which is for anyone in recovery that's thinking about doing this, to really follow your own heart, because I'm not recommending. I'm not recommending anything. Well, whatever it is, even ayahuasca, whatever it is, because I have now, since being on this path for now, 4 years, 4 years. I know lots of people that have long-term recovery, that serious recovery, that have gone and also taken plant medicine, and their lives have improved. I also have heard many stories of people in recovery wanting the psychedelics to be a magic bullet, although maybe they don't know that, but subconsciously that's what they want. Go and take plant medicine, and my fear of what was going to happen to me happened to them. For me, it's been nothing.
So they got addicted to that.
They relapsed and started drinking again, or started using drugs again, and so it's I don't,
You have to be ready. I think that the real answer is that you have to be ready. You have to listen to your body, and no matter what,
follow your heart.
Yes, and I don't think there is I think everything in the universe is meant to bloom at some point, and to really change, and to really, as you were saying at the very beginning, you were having all of those car accidents and still you were not ready, and then you had these beautiful 7 days of sobriety and still you are not ready, I feel like ultimately, even if they do that and it gets bad in a sense, it's part of the journey, they have to. Every time you get a little bit more pain and you get a little bit more into the relapse and into the spiral, the spiral itself becomes so painful that it helps you get out of the spiral. That's really how our brain works. That it gets to a point where, because our brain is very like an electric circuit. It's made of electrical circuits, and so there is a point in which if you overload the circuit goes in short circuit, right? And so that's what happens when people, hit rock bottom or have awakening experiences due to trauma. That what happens is that our brain circuits that are usually keeping us into our compulsions are so overloaded by us using them so much, with all of these drugs and all these things, that then they go in short circuit. And when that turns off, it's as if you don't have the compulsion anymore. You can finally be clear-minded, which is what happened to you with the weed when you were a child, when you were 14. that your amygdala went into short circuit,
Yeah.
and you finally opened the brain fog in which you were, the anxiety in which you were, and you saw the truth, right? You saw the reality, the present, instead of all the, self-deprecating things that you were telling yourself every day. And so you finally found yourself, okay, like, it's all in my mind, I'm here. But for that to happen, there has to be a short circuit somewhere. And so these constant, the problem is that for how our brain works, the more we use a certain circuit, the more that circuit grows. And the more it grows, the more power it's capable of, supporting. And so if your compulsions reach a certain level that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, then they're that's why people, when they start getting addicted, initially you get 1 gram of something, and then you get 2 grams, and then you get 4 grams, because the circuit gets so big that for you to feed it in the same way and to have the same effect, you need to give it more and more, right? But in the same way, for you to turn it off, you need to give it more and more and more pain, right, for you to turn it off. And so that's why people go through all of these layers, because there is a point, because our brain is physical and our cranium is a physical cage to it. And so there is a point after which our brain can't grow that much. There are certain areas of the brain, they can't become as big as they want.
Right.
There's a limit that they have to have, right?
Well, and that's also the neuroplasticity that gets developed from the psychedelics, right? They help with, they have
to like rewire your brain, absolutely.
Right.
But like I'm talking about before, like the fact of like having to go through all of these things, it's because our brain gets wired in a certain way, and for you to turn it off and to turn off the part of the circuits that really is pushing you to keep having those addictions and keep having relapses, you really need to overload it so much that it goes in short circuit, and you finally are present to yourself, and you finally are like, oh wow, what am I doing? I'm like, officer, I'm like, what have I done with my life? But you have to, that's what rock bottom is, like when the pain reaches such a high level that you're like, this is not giving me pleasure anymore. It's not giving me relief anymore. It's just painful. I don't want it. But it has to be almost like your body has to reject it to the point that it becomes a sort of pain, because initially you feed it because it gives you the reward at the end. But once it stops, as you're saying, only the first year you got the happiness, the pleasure, and then it was just pain and mess and troubles and a lot of things,
Right.
And it's all physiological, like it's all organic in a sense. It all happens in a very natural way that people go through all of these things, and obviously there's some genetic reasons why maybe your brain is more prone to certain things. For
sure.
And going back to your mom, like they're like the fact that we had historically as a generation, because I'm also like, I feel like we're probably almost the same age. Our moms are we are the generation in which our moms went to work, both our parents were working. So as a humanity, genetically and epigenetically speaking, we have not evolved with that. And so that has been a huge breaking point that we were not adapted to genetically, and so our brain was not wired for these things. So that's why we had so much trauma. That's why we had so much things, and not obviously I'm pro women going to work. What I'm saying is that from a physiological and from a neurobiological standpoint, genetically we were not prone to adaptations to that, and so that's why a lot of people have built coping mechanisms that are ultimately maladaptive to these things, and this is just one of the topics, because we're talking about abandonment trauma and separation anxiety. This is a very specific topic, but there's so many other reasons why our generation had so much trauma. And one of these reasons is that we are in a society that has introduced exponentially a lot of new things that we have not evolved with, and so we are not adapted to, and so our brain were not wired for that. And that's why psychedelics has become such a huge tool today to rewire our brain, because if you're not genetically and epigenetically adapted to things, then you start and if you don't have a guide because your parents don't know either because it's a new thing for them too. And so if you don't have a guide that helps you wire your brain in the right way, and that's why it's important for kids today to have a guidance so that they develop in the right way and they start adapting coping mechanism right away. If you don't have guidance, the very first, this is something that like biologically is very well known, that in evolution, the very first interaction with a new element is always negative because there's so many ways in which it can go wrong, and so the first interaction with a new thing, such as your mom going to work or you having to have video games or kids having TVs, we didn't have these things before. So genetically and epigenetically we were not adapted to respond to those things. So there's so many ways in which it can go wrong, that it goes wrong. And so we develop these maladaptive behaviors because we don't know yet how to properly respond and to properly deal with all of the new things that our generation had to deal with. Like we're a generation in which we had computers, we had phones, we had smartphones. Like we were really like a generation of change in our society. We went through a lot of sudden introductions of elements in our lives and in our society that nobody had before, and we had to deal with them as a completely new thing. Our parents did not know how to deal with them. They've been used by the governments and by a lot of corporations intentionally to indoctrinate us. So all of these things is just suddenly introduced in our life without having the guidance to tell us how to deal with them properly. It has brought us to wire our brain in a way that is maladaptive. But then as you become an adult, it becomes difficult to rewire your brain without external tools that help you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like meditation, right? Like they say that psychedelics can help you rewire your brain in a similar way of what takes 20 years of meditation. But here's the thing, okay, which is about being in recovery and psychedelics. Like, so I've had just incredible healing from the use of psychedelics, from different kinds of psychedelics. It started with field trips, ketamine assisted psychedelic psychotherapy program, then psilocybin and MDMA together, and all these things, and so
all done in a therapeutic way,
correct,
not just
in a ceremonial way.
This is so important, guys, because there's a huge difference between what we call recreational drugs, because that's a drug at that point, and therapeutic use of substances, of any substance, because it can be plant medicine, it can be MDMA, it can be anything.
And the thing of it is from being able to see and sense that trauma and understand it and get down to the root cause of what the underlying addiction was. Again, not recommending this for anyone, but what happened to me over these last 3.5-4 years has been, after a certain amount of time of sitting with the psychedelics, healing, the fear of abandonment, like all the trauma, uncovering that I was molested on a psilocybin and MDMA journey, fairly early on, after about a year, I was like, this is why I did drugs and alcohol, was all of the trauma. And even after all those years and all the work that I had done on working on myself, it somehow didn't do the healing work that I was able to do with the addition of the psychedelics.
That's the brain plasticity that you mentioned.
Yes, but what happened was I was like, I feel like I've healed the reason why I was addicted to marijuana. And I was like, and then this is the thing, is like, being a former addict, I was like, I didn't know if I was just rationalizing, if I was justifying, but I was like, I feel like I might be able to just actually smoke weed and like once in a
Without
while,
being addicted.
right? And that's what's happened.
Wow.
I very rarely ever smoke it, and I smoked it one day, and I was like, and then but here's the interesting thing, right? Is because I had had such a long period of being sober, right? This is why I don't know if it's as effective for someone maybe in early recovery, because I had those 7 years of being sober. I knew what I really felt like without it and how good I felt. And when I smoke THC, marijuana, gummies, whatever it is, the next day I felt a little cloudy, a little foggy, not as motivated, and I was like, oh, I actually don't like how I feel the next day, so I don't want to smoke, actually. Like, I don't even want it. And you have to understand, from somebody that was such a hardcore pothead, to have that kind of a disconnect from it, and to have that kind of awareness was really incredible. And so it's the same with alcohol. Once in a while I'll drink, but rarely. And I'm going on 4 years now at this point, and that hasn't changed. Same thing with MDMA, because I've done intentional ceremonial work with MDMA, and of course I'm sure you know MDMA is now in phase 3 trials with MAPS for being approved for a psychedelic therapy for, PTSD, which makes, and the thing that's wild about that is that makes so much sense why I was able to uncover. It was the first time I had done MDMA in 7 years, and it was on that MDMA and mushroom ceremony that I went to. I set the intention at that point, because I blocked out, I knew I had trauma that was blocked out. I set the intention to uncover any repressed trauma. And in the hours leading up to the ceremony, I started seeing flashes of a school bus. And I was like, that was of like when the school bus, and I was like, what is that? And then I went into the ceremony, I got transported back onto that bus, and I saw the other boy molesting me. And I was like, right? Like, that is the power of what intentional use of psychedelics can create. But
I was about to say, because it's crazy that you have been on, you had used MDMA before.
And I had a crazy addiction to it.
So this is the difference, because the kind of brain circuit, and I think, to be honest with you, I think what MDMA is done to you at that point, because this is after Luke, right?
Yeah.
So I think what happened, to be honest, is that what you've done with Luke has been essential for the MDMA to have a different effect
for all, yeah.
Because he fed a different circuit of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have, because what the witness modality does, which is what the observing your mind does, is it makes your cortical brain develop, your prefrontal cortex and your cortex develop. Because that's where the witness modality is, but that's where the consciousness is. When we are addicted, instead, we tend to be in the reptilian and limbic brain all the time, and they turn off our capability of being present, our consciousness, our cortex. And so, by watching your mind constantly for 7 years, you have meditated 20 minutes a day every day, you have watched your mind, you have set the intentions for the day. You have really created this new neurological and electrical circuit in your brain that can be fed by the same substances that the other one was being fed from. But if you feed your compulsive part of the brain, you develop addictions. If you feed your conscious part of the brain, you bloom into a flower consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's different. So you see how it's beautiful. And part of that is this, but also I think it's, I also talk about ceremonies and rituals, and the power of setting intentions and of really directing the things. We have the power to create this channel of saying, I want for this food to heal me, right? And see, if you set those intentions, that food heals you. And instead, if you're angry, if you feel like the food can be poisonous for you, can become poisonous. And so the same thing for, you can direct, you can decide, I want to activate this part of my brain, I want to uncover that part of my brain. And you see that you said that you had these visions already even before having the medicine.
Right.
And I think I also have this sort of effect when I use Rapid, for example, that I set the intentions, and even before I start having things, visions, and I think it's part of it, it's that, we're activating what is already in the quantum field. Like when you set the intentions, you have already created this reality, and so you're stepping into it already. Like, it's like our reality is like a Gaussian. And so you're already starting to unravel it, even if you haven't even used the medicine yet, because through your intentions you already activated it. And from a neurobiological standpoint, you're focusing on that part of your brain. We have this power of telling your brain which part we want to use, which part we want to focus on. And if you do, then everything you eat, everything you breathe, the air you breathe, or they go there.
I want to go back, if I can, to something you said a minute ago, which is about which part of the brain you're feeding.
Yeah.
Because I've talked about this with Luke. I was like, I've thought about why there's people that have long-term recovery or like good recovery and can use psychedelics in an intentional way and heal and not relapse, and why the others don't. And what you're saying from a neurobiological standpoint makes sense, because I told him, I was like, I think the only reason why we've been able to do this and not have bad consequences is because we spent so many years like studying recovery, meditation, like learning about the ego, the mind, the self, and all of that work for so many years, that then what has happened, which has been incredible, is, listen, I don't call myself sober anymore. I don't use that terminology. For me, what I say is I'm still in recovery. I'm not sober according to the 12 steps, because it's very clear. No substances that affect you from the neck up are to be used. And if they are, then you've relapsed, and there's those hard lines. And so because of that intentional use of them, what they've done is they've actually had the opposite effect of what I was afraid of. I haven't relapsed. I haven't destroyed my life. I haven't, gone crazy with drugs again. My recovery has only gotten deeper. My recovery has grown. Yes. Like, I understand how to look at myself. I have a much deeper awareness of myself. I'm able to pause in a way when my trauma gets triggered, because trauma never goes away, right? We have a different relationship with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm able now to pause when my trauma gets triggered and have a different response, because those underlying core traumas of what the addiction were have been healed and continue to heal through the work with psychedelics. And so fast forward, I met a woman then in 2021 who had a program to teach people how to work with spirits, how to work with energies. And she was my first teacher into this path that I really like. If you would have told me I'm doing now, that I would be doing this 4 years ago, I would.
4 years ago,
imagine
I would had the first car accident,
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, yeah, I would not have believed it, and
absolutely.
so.
And I want to just add something to what you said about the fact that you have I don't like calling them psychedelics, to be honest. It's like, I feel like we use this term all the time.
Medicine.
Yeah, but it's fine. I'm just saying that it's like, it's very misleading, because psychedelics is really almost a negative term. Like, they give you hallucinations. They don't. They connect you to a different part of your brain that we need to activate, which is the cortical brain.
I like
and
that.
so
That's
good. And so it's a medicine. So psychedelic sounds very recreational. I think it's been a term intentionally used, created to deprecate the function of these things. And going back to the garden analogy, to the analogy of the garden, so if you don't watch your brain, if you don't watch your mind, if you don't watch your garden, bad weeds can grow and take over, and after a while you don't have the capability even of realizing that your garden is different, because there are no reference points anymore. Everything is kind of, you know, outgrown and weird. But what you've done with psychedelics is actually we look, I think, initially, you have planted a new plant in your garden. What you've done is that you've planted a new function, and you've started growing that function. That function was something that helped you keep track of your garden, that helped you keep your garden clean, that helped you, you know, it's almost as if you got, you know, a gardener, you know, with that, like with the use of the plant medicine, ceremonial use of psychedelics, of different kinds of like medicine. You have ultimately hired a gardener, basically, that is capable of understanding what is going on and does the right thing at the right time, so that your garden stays clean and nice and pretty and it grows better. I feel like really like, well, you know, you planted something new that helps you grow. And it's really like that, because our neurons are literally like plants. They literally look like plants. They have like these little roots that attach to the brain, you know, and then they get all their connections, like literally they look like plants. And so it's really like you have planted new things that then now they allow you, and they give you the power and the
100%.
skills to keep track of everything else, to not use everything else, instead of just compulsively use your compulsive brain and your compulsive functions. And this is incredible. And I think I often talk about plant medicine because it helped me a lot as well, and because it's incredible. I think, you know, it's something that it's necessary for the next step of our evolution as a humanity, because what is happening is that we have been, you know, as much as I feel like your life story is the life story of humanity, and is the life story of everybody, every one of us. And we really went from a time in history in which we were very violent and very compulsive, you know, and a lot of people are like that even today. There are a lot of people in power, and a lot of, you know, fraternities and Nazis and stuff like that. They're like really into that part of the brain. They're so compulsively sadistic and bad, right?
Yeah.
And they don't understand that as much as when we go into that part of our brain, we hurt ourselves and we put ourselves in trouble, and we're not capable of being aware of what is going on. Then in society, in humanity, the function of the cells that we're trying to, you know, starve, in a sense, is made by people who are that function in humanity, you know, that are doing the same thing. And so as much as plant medicine is necessary for the individual awakening at the neurobiological level, then in society it's important that, you know, we reach a certain threshold of people who have reached certain parts of their brain, so that that part of the brain takes over, not just in us, but in society, so that we become stronger than the compulsive people in society, so that you know, the healers have to take over, you know, as much as the cortical brain has to take over in our brain for us to heal, and for us to use the same exact substances, you know, the same exact food and the same exact things that we used to do before, but without feeding our compulsive side. It's not a matter of what we do, it's a matter of like what kind of brain circuit those things feed. And in society it's the same, you know, like it's not that we're gonna have to change our habits that much as a society. It's more about feeding different things, you know. Money is good if you give money to healers, you know, like money is bad if you give money to people who try to oppress the population. And so it's all about where you channel everything, where you channel. And so as a society, what the spreading of psychedelics, thanks to MAPS as well, are doing is that they're finally allowing a bigger portion of the population to reach that level of consciousness, to activate the portion of the brain, and to become stronger than those who haven't reached that side, and who are, you know, the sadistic people in society that are really oppressing us so much. You know, Squid Game is not, it's a documentary, it's not a movie, it's not.
Well, and what makes that difficult for a lot of people is people want it to be convenient and easy. People want to be able to just take a pill and have their anxiety go away. Sure, it would be nice, but the consequences of that is that you're not actually doing the work to heal or address and treat. Like, that's why functional medicine is really great, is because it treats, looks at what the underlying root cause is.
We're going back to the neurobiology. With a pill for anti-anxiety pill, you're not going to kill the cells that give
breath work, right? Breath work, cold plunges, saunas. Like, there's things that we can do that actually will then heal that, or help address, not necessarily always heal it, but it will help address it.
There's no shortcut,
right?
There's no shortcut in healing, because healing comes because we're consistent. As I said at the very beginning, I feel like I love how I go full circle every time in my episodes without wanting to, without planning on doing it. I feel like really our body is like an antenna. Like, we're consistent with ourselves. And so if you have a certain body shape, and this is well known in Ayurveda and different kinds of philosophies, a certain body shape corresponds to a certain kind of personality type, and so in the same way, the kind of chemicals that are in our body, the kind of cells in our brain, how we are wired, that determines how we feel. And so if you're anxious, your body is in a certain way, your brain is in a certain way, your chemicals in your blood are in a certain way,
Yeah.
So for you to actually heal, you can't just take a pill and press a button and that goes away, because that's just temporary and actually just perturbs the system in a way that this equation that your homeostatic system is becomes just unbalanced, and then you have to create more cushions and then you get addicted, and then you have withdrawal symptoms, and then you have to, all of these things. And he said real healing comes when you change the whole equation, when you change the homeostasis. It's still, homeostasis means that things are steady in a sense, are balanced, but that balance can be made can have a very different composition. You are balanced, I'm balanced, but we are very different people, and so for us to have a certain kind of behavior and to be certain ways, we need to change the composition, the biochemical composition, the arrangement of our molecules, the kind of cells we have. Our brain is wired. We need to change all of that. Once you change all of that, then you feel different. So you can't change it with a pill.
And that's where the integration of the plant medicines comes into play, because that's something else we should touch on is the integration of them are so important. And what it's like you go and you have this like incredible experience.
I say this all the time too.
And then how you integrate it. For me, that's been continued meditation, breath work. I'm also a somatic breath work facilitator. And also inner child work and reparenting has been the single biggest tool for integration in my life. I started it before. It started early in January of 2020, and I've been doing it ever since. And I go to the mirror, I talk to little David. I talk to that little child that's still inside, because it's like a Russian doll. When you pull one up, you see what's under it. And if anybody that's listening would like this mirror process, I will give it to you for fun and for free. You let me know, and I will send you a document that has it all laid out. And so I journal. I take a journal and I put a picture of myself as an adult, that like a good picture that I like as an adult in the back of the journal, and then a picture of myself like as a kid that I really like, and I put that in the front of the journal. And every night I would write down all of the things that I did from that day that I did well, that were good, and that pleased me. And then you go to the mirror the next morning, and then I would basically read that list while looking at myself in the mirror, and then talking to little David, telling him how much I love him, how proud I am of him, what a good job he's doing. And I say to myself in the mornings while I'm looking in the mirror, I say, David, I give you the love, the approval, the validation, the trust that you need. I give it to you. So you don't need it from anyone else. And if you get it, it's a bonus, right? And so that's been an integration tool that I just wanted to share, because that could be very helpful for anyone that's going through this process, especially if you have like fear of abandonment or, you know, mother wound, father wound, whatever those deep wounds are. And yeah, and so all through all that, you know, one thing led to another, and then I started making contact with spirits. I started learning how to shamanic journey. I started going into trance states, putting myself in trance states, you know, not on any medicine, sober, I'm saying, was when this all started. And then one thing led to another, and the stuff that I had learned from her, I wanted to start facilitating in a legal capacity, and I knew cacao was one of the things we learned about was cacao. And so I got cacao, and then I asked the people that I got it from, I said, you know, I'm doing these ceremonies, I would like to donate a portion of what I receive back to Guatemala where this cacao comes from. And then they said, well, our friends have this GoFundMe. And so I donated to the GoFundMe. It was for families that had lost their home because of minery, because they were displaced. The Guatemalan government had kicked them out of their home, all these families, because they lived above a nickel mine.
Oh, and, course, right?
And so I donated that first ceremony, and then I noticed after that first ceremony, I noticed they closed the GoFundMe. And then I emailed them and I said, you know, I noticed you closed this and you're thousands of dollars under your goal. I'd love to keep donating every month. You know, I plan to do these ceremonies every month. And they said, thank you so much. A few days went by, and then they said, you know, their names are Solvay and Martin. They have a company called the Mayan Wisdom Project. And they said, we see the beautiful work you're doing with cacao. We're looking at your Instagram, and we want to invite you to our training program to be trained by Mayans for free. And it was a very expensive program, and they had never done that before. They've never done it since. It was just kind of like a cosmic, again, alignment. And then that's what started me on the whole path. That's how I started my cacao business of importing cacao, because I get it from the Mayan Wisdom Project, from Solvay and Martin. And then I started this cacao business, and then now they do it, I think, maybe once or twice a year. The Mayan Wisdom Project does something called the Cacao Challenge, which you might want to do the next time they have it. You can go to their website and get on their mailing list, is what I would recommend. I think it's themayanwisdomproject.com or mayanwisdomproject.com. And they started doing these cacao challenges where basically every day you would get a different recipe for the cacao according to what the Mayan energy of the day is. So, you know, like today it would be with anato or achiote. Another day it's with cinnamon. Like, these are ancient recipes that the Mayans have according to what the energy of the day is. And so I did that, and then I started learning about, that's where I started learning about my Mayan energy. And then I did the next cacao challenge. They were doing it more often back then. I did the next one and the next one. And then I started looking up people's energies that were coming to ceremonies. And, you know, this is in what, like 2021, 22 now. And it was so accurate. Like, it was crazy. Everybody's energy that I looked up, and that's just the main energy, like I did with you, was so accurate. I was like, there's something to this. And so while I was continuing, you know, training, working with spirits and building my relationship with energies and spirits, I started learning about the Mayan calendar and all that. And then I got what's called a Tzite reading from the men that were to become my first teachers. And at that point, all the teachers I had were women, and they had said, you know, they do these reading of these beings. They're these beings from the coral tree, or the Tzite tree, and I could literally see through the Zoom. I could see my spirit teams moving the beings.
Wow.
Like, I literally, I could see, it was like, you know, when spirits come to me and when I communicate with them, they look like a translucent, sort of like a translucent white color. And then also I've learned how to identify spirits. Bad spirits will masquerade as good spirits, and so that's a thing. And I've learned how to identify that.
That's important.
And
I have been targeted by so many bad spirits also.
Yeah, I bet you're medium, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so I saw this hand moving them, and I was like, is it even? I said, I've been looking to train with a specific lineage. And I said, is it even possible for a white Jewish man from Encino to become an achich, And they said, well, maybe, but you'd need to come here first. We need to meet you. We need to have a special ceremony. And so I was like, let's go. Solai and Martin met me in Guatemala. Well, they live in Guatemala. And they took me to meet the twins. They were to become my teachers. And we had this special ceremony, and I got permission. Like during the ceremony, and Solvay was translating for me because necesito practicar español para mí. I'm in school for Spanish and have been now for almost a year and a half learning because they didn't speak English and my new teacher doesn't speak English. So I need to learn because we always need to have a translator. And so they said like during the fire, like I said, one of the things that I've learned and am continuing to learn is how to read and interpret messages from the fire. And they said, one of your next they said, when you're an achich, people are going to be coming to you with all different kinds of issues. And then I stopped her and I said, wait. They said, when I'm an achich, does that mean that they'll train me? And they said yes. And so that's how that's how it started. And then a few months later I went back to Guatemala and we did the first round of training, and I've been going back and forth there ever since. And they gave me permission, and I have been doing these fire ceremonies. If anyone would like to come, we have them in Canoga Park, which is where I live at my space, and I do them. Energy exchanges for people to come and give what's comfortable. They're like donation based. And so I've started this path, and it's been beautiful, and I've helped a lot of people. With cacao, with even just cacao.
And I wanted to say something more about your cacao because you were telling me before the episode, like how special it is, and I would like for you to first of all tell why is your cacao special and where people can find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many places you can go and buy ceremonial cacao, and
by the way, just because not everybody knows what ceremonial cacao is, right? So the thing is that there is first of all, cacao is what like chocolate basically, but cacao is the version that is not roasted, and so it has a lot more things like good beneficial things for you because it's completely raw. It's not roasted, right? And so when you roast things, they always get a lot of compounds are lost or ruined, or they chemically change. Terpenes, they think, they contain
all the healthy
flavonoids,
fats,
the healthy fats, etc.
Polyphenols,
exactly. That's what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so that, but also the holy cacao, the ceremonial cacao, is what is used in cacao ceremonies, which is also something I host as well, which is different in the sense that it is made in a sacred way as much as plant medicine is made by the tribes and is made by hand, and is very special, and it's usually way more expensive than regular cacao powder that you find, and it's usually not made in powder, is made as bars or like nibbles or different kinds of shapes. So how is your cacao made?
Thank you for that. Yes, so most cacao that you're going to find, unless you go to Guatemala, because this comes straight from there, but even cacao that you can buy from companies that comes from Guatemala, the majority of companies, when they take the cacao beans and they go to make it into the paste, to grind them, they put them through a metal machine. And mama cacao, the spirit of cacao, is feminine, and metal is a masculine energy. And so that cuts some of the energy of the cacao away. And so
and in ways that are non-natural for the cacao, because if it's
correct.
masculine, you're cutting it with the masculine, you're cutting the feminine, basically.
Correct. When I use a knife, I use a ceramic knife.
Yes, that's what I
Not
was
metal.
about to tell
When
you.
I make it in a pot, I use a ceramic pot. I use a wooden spoon. And that's because I follow that of not using any metal. Now, is that to say that all other ceremonial cacaos are no good because they've been processed through metal machines? No. Don't misunderstand me. I love all cacao. I think all cacao is beautiful. However, there is a difference when you drink cacao that has been made in the ancient way, that has been made for thousands and thousands of years. And that is what's special about this cacao, is no metal, no machines are ever used. It's all hand grown and hand
Made.
crushed
Yeah.
with the metate. And so it makes a difference, right?
Absolutely.
And also the money goes towards biodiverse farming, and so they're very, very conscious about the type of farming practices that they use
And they also do
in the
ceremonies,
farms.
you were
And
telling me.
correct. And they do special ceremonies when it's planted, when it's harvested, when it's transformed. And actually, that's really what they would be considered a cacao ceremony. There is no word for ceremony in the Mayan cosmovision. What they call it would be, closest thing would be like a kotzich, which is, there are words. There are words for giving gratitude. And so these, what in the West we call, or the North we call ceremonies, really they call kotzich, which are getting together to speak words of gratitude. And so these special ceremonies, or kotzich, are done when it's planted, when it's harvested, when it's transformed. Then before it's packaged, they do another special ceremony where they invoke the sacred Mayan energies into the cacao, and then they package it, and then they ship it. And so because of all of that, yes, it is, I will tell you flat out, it is the most expensive cacao that you're probably ever going to buy. And I have had so many people tell me that it's worth it because it is the best cacao that they've ever had. I've had so many people that are like serious cacao connoisseurs. And granted, this cacao, there's other cacaos that you can buy that are going to be more convenient because they're going to be already ground. But even if you get cacao nibs, if it comes in that form, it loses some of the cacao butters. And for women, I will say that I have heard, my girlfriend says it as well, that when they are on their moon cycle, that nothing satisfies cravings more than cacao. It really, because it has all those polyphenols and flavonols and healthy fats, and it just somehow is able to
hormonally
satisfy.
Perfect. It's perfect. Like
those
it's
cravings.
very. I use cacao a lot, and I use always, like, I try to use ethically sourced and like sustainable, and like, you know, all of these kind of like biodiverse farms, because cacao is one of the best antioxidants on the planet, and it activates your intuition, it reactivates your pineal gland, your third eye, and it's so important for your circulatory system, for so many things. It's
heart
really,
health.
It's really the nectar of the gods. Like, and then there is a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of wars in the world to obtain the best cacao from Africa, for example, from South America, to put the hands on the cacao, right? Because cacao is really something that feeds the best parts of our brain, the best parts of our body, and I use it daily. Like,
it used to be currency. The Mayans used to use it as currency. That's why they call it Mayan gold. Yeah, and people used to come from Mexico and Peru to the area of Guatemala where this comes from, which is the Alta Verapaz and the Baja Verapaz regions, to get this type of cacao because it was known as being the best cacao in the world.
Wow.
And also we've talked a little bit about the physical benefits, but from a spiritual benefit, an emotional benefit, the way in which cacao has changed my life is cacao is known as a heart opener, right? But what does that really mean? What does it mean, heart opener? It's a very like sort of hard term to understand. Like, what does that actually do? Well, if you think about it, when your heart's open, you're more kind, you're more generous, you're more maybe thoughtful. And so when it says it opens our hearts, it's not so much, I've found, and what other people say as well, that it's about having that be towards other people, because unless you're a sociopath, it's pretty easy to be, or narcissistic, it's pretty easy to be empathetic to other people. But it's how we treat ourselves, right? Full circle to that, to what we say to ourselves. It's given me a greater ability to have kindness and to be kind and, my God, patient with myself. And so that's what, from a spiritual standpoint, that is how cacao has changed my life, and why I really feel it's so valuable. And so so my website is healyoursoulnow.com, which is the same as my Instagram. And we'll give your listeners, I think we said a 5% discount. Use the code New Earth, and you'll get 5% off your order. And so that, and we can do the same thing for the incredible lip balm that I make, actually, that I have right here.
You were showing me
which
that.
is like, called, it's called Lip Magic.
Look, guys. He makes this.
I make it.
It's a lip balm that he makes. Can I open it?
Yeah.
Let me see.
It's dirty because it's been in my pocket. One of the things about it is the container is fully biodegradable and compostable. Yeah, so this I make by hand. A lot of people don't realize that when I say I make this lip balm, they think like I outsource it. No, I literally bottle every single tube in my ceremony space. And it's made from organic beeswax, shea butter, coconut oil, and then I use doTERRA peppermint oil and lemon oil. And this was a COVID hobby and has been beautiful because I've had so many people tell me how much they love it. And it's really been a passion project, and it's been beautiful doing it. So we'll do the same thing for your listeners if they want to get it and get a discount.
New Earth.
You can use New Earth.
Use code New Earth to have a discount. I love it.
Yeah. And we have all different types of events. So we talked about the Mayan fire ceremony. I wanted to take, this is new, I started them a few months ago. I wanted to take the ceremonial container and the 12-step support group container and find a way to merge them, because everybody benefits from talking, to sharing what's on their heart, what their struggles, something that they want to celebrate that's going on in their life. When we come together in community, there is something incredibly profound and healing from that. And so what we do is I like to call them ceremonial support groups. And so I have one that's for men. I do a men's group. And I do a co-ed, cacao and fire circle when the weather permits for the fire. Of course, right now, no, because of all the fires that we're having here in California. And so that was one of the other things I did this morning and have been doing, is sending prayers to those affected by those fires. And so we come together. I open sacred space. I use a process called calling the 7 sacred directions, which is what I use to communicate with my spirit teams and call them in, and higher power, God, source consciousness, oneness, whatever you want to call it. And so I open sacred space in that way, and then serve the cacao, and we sit around and drink the cacao, feel good, feel happy, because that's one of the other things. It regulates dopamine and serotonin. So when you have a good cup of ceremonial cacao, woof, I mean, you feel so happy. I always get about halfway through my cup and I'm just like, I love cacao. It's so good. And so, yeah, we drink cacao and we share, we share whatever people are struggling with. Or if there's something that people want to celebrate. And so we do those. Yeah, so we have all sorts of events. You can find them on my website, healyoursoulnow.com.
Heal your soul now, guys. We need to do that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David, for being here with us today.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it. I feel like we went past the 2 hours because I feel like there was so much. Your life is a real movie, and I think it's very, yes, it is. There should be a movie about your life, for real.
Thank you. If anyone wants to talk about that, let me know.
Yes, I think I'm going to put his contacts and everything there, but definitely, I think this is your journey has been very emblematic and very, very beautiful. And the fact, I think, going from being a child with abandonment trauma and with people-pleasing, compulsive behaviors to become a timekeeper, it's just a...
In training,
but it's just, other time, right?
Yeah.
In training, but that's really incredible that you've been able to be that strong. And I'm sure that as a child, you would have never thought that you could come so far. And so this is to say that we need to really give time to the process. And oftentimes, if you look at a sequoia tree, the seeds of sequoia trees are these tiny. These tiny little things are very flat and they look like, I don't know, almost farro, they're very thick, thin and almost transparent. They look like oats. They look like oats, and they're very, very tiny. And then they become these huge trees that last for thousands and thousands of years. And so we don't realize that oftentimes, as kids, we are seeds of the tree we become as adults. But oftentimes, the trees that becomes the most majestic and beautiful and long-lasting and sturdy start as very thin and very tiny or very afraid, and we don't know all of that in this garden that humanity is. And so it's important to value everybody so that everybody has the space and the time to become themselves. And sometimes difficulties, also challenges, is what we need to do in order for us to grow as the tree that we're supposed to become. Because I think that if you had not gone through all of these challenges in your life, you would have not been able to help so many people today, because you would have not known the shadow that you need to heal in others. It's only by walking through the darkness of your own shadow, of your own life, of your own challenges, and overcome them, that you become a healer capable of healing others. I don't believe that people can ever heal anybody, and that's why I'm so much against Western medicine. Oftentimes, you cannot heal anybody by studying on the books. You have to go through things. And you have to realize how your body feels, how your mind feels, what you have to do, and all of the relapses, and what you actually have to do to heal. And once you heal, then you can shine light on the trail for others to heal our way as well. You cannot otherwise possibly heal anyone. And so I think your journey has been very, although painful, it's been very necessary for the healer that you have become as an adult, and for the light that you're shining on the world, and for you wanting to shine, to spread the cacao and the good practice and to help people and to give back.
And one thing I do want to say is just that, and I said this earlier in the beginning, which is to humble myself. I am a conduit for the healing. I'm not the one that does it. Each and every person that comes and sits in ceremony with me, when we do work together, they are healing themselves. And what I oftentimes see is my spirit teams working in connection with their spirit teams, their spirit guides, and downloading messages, downloading healing. So really, I am just the channel. I ask to be used as a hollow bone for the healing to be the conduit for it. And I say that to humble myself and not forget that I'm not the one that's doing it. It's spirit. It's God that's doing it. It's not me. And it's that person showing up to do the work that is actually opening that channel for that energy and that healing to come through to them, so they are really the one that's doing it.
I love it. I
just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And even if people tend to be very grateful to the people that heal them, you know, they perceive as healers, it is true that, like, as soon as you surrender and you're like, officer, I need to change my life, you know, as soon as you say that, then you open a channel for this divine healing to come through you and to heal you. Before then, you can't heal. Nobody can heal you. You know, nobody can heal anyone who has not touched rock bottom, who has not come to the understanding that something needs to be changed. You know, there has to be some major radical change in their life. So until they reach that level, nothing can heal them. And so that's why I think you're right that nobody's a healer. People are channelers. You know, we channel, we facilitate healing.
Right.
We channel healing, but ultimately it is you opening your portal to heal that allows you to heal. And nobody is ever going to be able to heal you unless you reach that point. And that's why it's important to have a holistic approach and to use plant medicine and spirituality and ceremonies and all of these things to heal. You cannot heal yourself with a pill. You can put a patch on anything, but you cannot heal.
And one more thing, which is important, is being careful who you sit with. Like, I never... Ceremony, yeah, because what you said, you're opening your channel. I mean, I don't facilitate, you know, plant medicines other than cacao, right? But when someone is going to go sit with a plant medicine that is psychoactive, like ayahuasca, wachuma, peyote, right, any of these, even if it's LSD, whatever it is, ask your facilitator questions, right? Like, people always say, can I ask you questions, or do you mind answering them? I'm like, please, if you weren't asking me questions, right? I love it. And that's even just for cacao. And I love it when people ask questions. And so that's something, is also getting referrals, who you sit with, when you sit with these medicines, who you're sitting with, who you're choosing to put your soul and spirit in front of and open your channel. You want to make sure that that is a worker of light, because there are dark shamans. There are dark facilitators. I've heard so many stories of women getting taken advantage of in, like, sexually, in you know, I mean, I watched this, and I know we can wrap it up, but I watched this one documentary, and I saw this guy, you know, in Mexico, you know, who served bufo, and that could be a whole episode. We didn't even really get into bufo, but you know, that was one thing that was a game changer. But like, he basically victim shamed her, and he basically said, oh, well, she shouldn't, she's inviting that if she dresses that way or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot. And I just wanted to just bring that up and comment on it, because we've had this great conversation about all of the light, and it's all there, and it's all great, and it's good also for people to understand there is a dark side. Today is the day of duality, right? Today is the light and the dark, Akabal. So it's it's important to be aware and trust and make sure that you've properly vetted who you're sitting with.
Absolutely. This is an important day, this sense, the day of duality, because this is something I had to come to understand as well, in terms of the darkness and the light, because I've always been very much of a light worker, like, since my whole life. But when you have so much light, then it's challenging for you to realize that the darkness even exists. And so I kept trying to look at other people through my lenses that was light. And so I went through so many abusive relationships in my life, because I kept believing that only light existed, I did not believe in the darkness. And as a in a physical sense, darkness and light are just darkness and light. It's just physical, right? But we don't understand that our physical reality is just the egoic version of a much bigger divine dimension, that where dark and light make sense, have like there is a good and there is a bad. And so in that, like, so we tend, like, because from a physical perspective, darkness and light both exist, but from a divine perspective, yes, they exist, but you need to watch, and you need to be aware of what's your side, in a sense. Like, if you're a light worker, you need to be careful and to only go to ceremonialists who are in the kingdom of light, because otherwise you're going to be taken advantage of, because it's like, in as much as in an ecosystem, you can have a lion, you can have a gazelle, and there's no good and bad, because the gazelles are gazelles and the lions are lions. But if a gazelle ends up in a cave of lions, that's bad for the gazelle.
Yeah, exactly.
And the same is for if the lion ends up in the middle of a herd of gazelles, it's gonna get smashed. And so it's important to really understand that if you're a light worker, if you're prevalently light, like, you need to stay in the light, and you need to really recognize when people are not in the light, where people are dark, because we really live in a world where this is very real, like, there is this very, very straight line between hate and love, between darkness and light, and there is no in between, like, either you're a light worker or you're not. And most light workers don't know that they are when they're young, and because you look at the world through, while the darkness tends to be aware of the light, because they see
right.
people think in a more predatory way, and so they realize when people are gazelles, right? And so instead, light workers tend to be more naive, more innocent, more
it's so true.
And it's the
so
opposite,
true.
right? We tend to become aware of the darkness much later in life. And so it's important, especially when you adventure in a new journey, which is plant medicine, for example, or healing, or medicine of any kind, to understand that not all people who work in this field that have the same amount of light. Not all the people are in the light. There are a lot of dark and shadow worker that work in the shadow, live in the shadow, and really work in a much
and it doesn't even only just have to be medicine. It can be
there's
dark achkich too. There's dark Mayan Time Keepers too. So I've heard stories of that too.
So we should have a totally different episode on this. But
I just wanted to mention it because I feel like
important.
That and integration are two pieces that are
integration of plant. And again, like I said it in previous episode as well, like, it's important, as he said, integration. This means to not just go once and have a psychedelic trip. Just this medicine, like, it's not recreational. And so medicine is something that you do as a therapy daily or monthly or bi-monthly, and you integrate in between, and then you understand what you have to do next. And then it's a journey, right? It's a journey, and as much as there is no magic pill, there is no magic plant medicine, it's like everything is a journey, and it's a choice. Every time is about the choice of healing. And so you do the first step, and then you're like, I want to keep healing, and then you do the next step, and you want to keep healing, not in a compulsive way, but in a conscious way, in which you realize that, as he said, I'm not sober. I'm recovering constantly. We're constantly in this healing journey. It's not that one day you're like, I'm healed. It's a constant journey, and it's all about the choice of healing, and the choice of light, and the choice of God and spiritual alignment, exactly. So thank you so much for
thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I love this episode, and probably we're gonna host you again to talk more about plant medicine, more specific, because I feel like we touched on it, but it wasn't very deep.
I mean, there's like so much. We didn't even get into Bufo.
No, it's fine. Doesn't matter.
and obviously and caveat to say that these I've taken these medicines in places where they're legal.
Yeah, absolutely. This is important.
That's important to say too. So
exactly, especially it's also more.
Where you do it.
And especially it's also better in a sense, because it's more
because
a
it's legal.
ceremony. It's legal, but also it's like it's a tradition. It's like going for carnival in Brazil or going for carnival in Canada. You want to go to Brazil for carnival, right? And so it's the same thing we have in Italy, this culture of like going to the place where things originates, because it's a completely different experience as well. And so thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time, and probably we're going to have him again here because this has been great. So thank you everybody, and I'll see you guys next time.
Adios.